Welcome back to another segment of the MCR. My name's TJ. Please like, share, and subscribe. In this segment, I'd like to discuss something I heard on the Charlie Kirk show almost a week ago. Charlie Kirk had a representative from the Rebel News. He claimed to be Canadian, and he was giving kind of an update as to what the Canadian truckers were doing in their protests, and invariably, the Canadian Constitution got brought up, and he said a few things that I had to do some research and look into. As he was speaking with Charlie Kirk, he would start from the position of Canada, a country not born out of a Revolutionary War. Canada, a country that never had the kind of bloody civil war we had. For the last 80 years, Canada has existed under the protective hand of the United States. And in saying all this, he basically said, given the peaceful lifestyle of your average Canadian, the Canadian government was not prepared for and caught a little off guard when the truckers commenced with their protest and basically shut down Ottawa. He compared the Canadian Constitution to the U.S. Constitution, and in that comparison, he said, when the Constitution was written, it was written a few years after our Revolutionary War, where we won our independence. Therefore, it was kind of written from a revolutionary's perspective or mindset. He compared it to the Canadian Constitution in that, once the U.S. got their independence from Canada, the British loyalists who were within the colonies, now the newly formed United States, fled north to Canada, and Canada would continue for about almost another 80 years or so as a loyal British colony, where proper Englishmen resided. And the reason why I say proper Englishmen is because that's kind of how the Canadian Constitution was written. It was written from the mindset, the perspective of a proper Englishman. And so what happens is on July 1st, 1867, Canada writes their Constitution. Today they are governed by the Constitution Acts 1867 to 1982. And I have not read, I'll confess, I have not read the whole thing, but I read bits and pieces, and the one portion in particular I was especially interested in. It's not the easiest to read, aside from the legalese in the Queen's English, but I'm going to share a few portions with you and see if you interpret them the way I interpreted them, the way the representative from Rebel News on the Charlie Kirk show shared them. Okay? When you look at the Canadian Constitution, if you were to print it out, it'd be like 112 pages long. But part of the problem to that is the first column's in English, the second column's in French, thus making it 112 pages long. But the fact that it's half of it's in French might be one problem perhaps. But when you get about halfway through the Canadian Constitution, you get to what's titled Part 1, Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And this brings us to the portions that I'd like to read and share with you. Okay? Part 1, Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. There's a subtitle of Guarantee of Rights and Freedoms. And this is what it reads under Guarantee of Rights and Freedoms. Now, this is a guarantee. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it, subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. So it guarantees rights, but they're subject to reasonable limits. That's how I'm reading it. Okay? And then the next subtitle says Fundamental Freedoms. And it lists the fundamental freedoms, freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, belief, expression, including freedom of press, freedom of peaceful assembly, freedom of association. So it lists these freedoms, but remember, they're subject to reasonable limits. They continue with different types of rights. There's what I find interesting here: mobility of rights, saying you have the right to enter and leave Canada and move freely throughout the country. And then here's the next section that I find very interesting. They have a subtitle: Legal Rights, Life, Liberty, and Security of Person. And again, another phrase that caught my eye here. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof, except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. Again, except in accordance. So you have rights except in accordance to blah, blah, blah. I think I'm reading those right. You have rights, but they're subject to what? Reasonable limits? I don't know, man. You talk about a huge red flag there. I can't help but think that that's a built-in catch-22. And the reason why I'm mentioning all this is, by law, Justin Trudeau can say these protests are unlawful. And by law, since he's deemed them unlawful, they can be arrested because they have exceeded reasonable limits. I say this because I wish everyone in the United States would appreciate the foresight of our founding fathers. I'm not saying this to dog on Canada. We couldn't have a better neighbor to the north when you consider we have the longest undefended border in the world. We don't have guns pointing at each other like you see across the world with other countries. We're not threatening to invade each other. Heck, if they had the right to keep and bear arms, I think it'd be a cool place to live. Okay, but they don't. I just wanted to stress the text that the Canadian Constitution that enables to allow the government to spec reasonable limits. I can't. I'm having trouble getting past that. So, I think Canada ought to serve as an object lesson of what happens when you have a government without restriction. That is unable to determine what is and isn't a reasonable limit. And that's all I really wanted to make in this segment here. And I know this segment may not have been a sexy enough topic for some, but I was compelled to share this topic in this one here, and that's all I got. That's all I got. We're going to do another update on what else happening with the truckers' protest. Things are constantly developing. The truckers in Ottawa haven't backed down from Justin Trudeau's threats. Yesterday with the Ambassador Bridge has been shut down. They brought in quite the goon squad to get the protesters out of the way, and they attempted to reopen the bridge, and they kind of got the protesters moved, but then it's almost like another group moved in. Last I heard, because I checked this morning, the Ambassador Bridge is still shut down. Also, protests are expanding. Now they got protests. They haven't shut down the Blue Water Bridge up in Port Huron. There's a road that runs along the St. Clair River that connects to the lake to the north. Was it Lake Huron? I think it is. Okay. But they have a walkway and kind of like a little riverfront there, and all the truckers they're having at it, man. They're protesting. They're honking their horns. They're going to town. They haven't shut down the Blue Water Bridge, but they are definitely protesting at the Blue Water Bridge. And now the governor of New York, she's all worried because, for those unaware, you have Buffalo with the Peace Bridge there. Okay, and she's worried that what's happening here in Detroit and now Port Huron, it's only a matter of time before it starts there in Buffalo at the Peace Bridge. that you almost got to consider that a given. So, we're going to see how all this plays out, and they just want it all to end. If they just, and you know what, the elitism in the Canadian with Justin Trudeau, he just refuses. It's going to be his way or no way, and this, you know what, I don't know how much longer this is all going to remain peaceful, but you would think the insanity here has got to end at some point. So in any event, that's all I got. I know I've rambled here towards the end. Catch you in the next segment. As always, be safe, watch your six, and don't tread on me.